Houston, we have yet another content creator that is sponsored getting caught shill bidding. There's a bit to unpack here and it relates to Rob, the sports card therapist, as you can see on screen. Now, there's a few clarifications I want to give to this because there's some things that I think are important to talk to on this situation. I will give the caveat up front that I messaged Rob yesterday. He said he was willing to jump on a live with me. I've not given him an answer on that just yet. He has had, or he's given invitations, I should say, to the likes of AIH Sports and P. Ryan to do the same thing. I initially told him that I think it's probably best for him to do it with the two of those guys as opposed to me, considering they've not really interacted with him all that much in the past. I've been on his podcast, even though there's no conflict of interest there. We don't really communicate all that much. I just think from an optics perspective, it makes sense for him to do it with those guys instead. But if you guys think I should have him on, I'm more than willing to sort of do that as well. But just wanted to put that caveat there up front. Now, this one is interesting. Yes, I do use that word all the time, but basically, there were some Eli Manning cards that sold on eBay. Rob was the high payer for those, the high bidder, decided to not pay for them. And then accusations towards shill bidding came towards him. Rob put out, an apology video, a confession style video where he talked to the things of what he did. And I'll talk to that in a sec, that he's now since deleted. But there's a few things, like I said, to unpack there. Now, this was brought to the attention of us within the hobby via Modest Card Collection, who was the underbidder on one of the Eli Manning cards. Now, we're going to go back to the bidding activity of this card in a second. But what he essentially says here is that he took an L on this initially because he was the underbidder, somebody overpaid. But then after a few days, he decided to just, message the seller to see what went down, whether or not the buyer had paid or not. The seller basically said the person has 100% feedback. I'm comfortable they're going to pay. Let's just see what happens. And you can sort of see that quote there. He said he had not paid, but was 100% feedback, so it was only a matter of time. Basically time to let him know. And then essentially after the fourth day, of no payment, he reached out back to Modest Card Collection and said, the guy hasn't paid, I've cancelled it. Do you want the card for this price? So in fact, he bought it. Now, this is where sort of things get interesting because Rob commented and basically said, congrats, me and a handful of others were also bidding on this one. Now, you can no longer see the information via Modest Card Collection's story, but what essentially happened from there onwards was that he decided to look into Rob's account because he had a suspicion that something, untoward happened here. It looked like, market manipulation, shill bidding. And what he found was that the person that actually won the card was Rob's account. And then through a bit more investigation by looking at Rob's Instagram page, he was able to determine that that account that had won the card that not paid was actually Rob's eBay account. And he sort of realized that by looking at certain cards that Rob had posted on his page that were then listed on his eBay account. And that's how he was able to determine that they were in fact the same. Now, for those of you that don't know, eBay bid history is a bit hard to look into because it doesn't actually show you who the username was, but like I said, through matching the feedback and then the, items listed by this seller and then also listed on Rob's Instagram page, he got to the conclusion pretty quickly that they were in fact Rob's accounts that he was bidding on and then not paying. So very much looked like shill bidding. And the other thing to point out is that it wasn't just this one Eli Manning gold prism. There was, I think, one or two other auctions that he also didn't pay for in the same listing from this seller. Now, things got a bit more interesting from there onwards because Rob essentially put out a video acknowledging the fact that he did something wrong. He basically bought these cards. He thought they were shill bid, and that's a very important thing to talk to. He thought they were shill bid, so that is the reason why he didn't pay. And, through the investigation of, the bid activity of that, it doesn't actually look like shill bidding. So there's a few things to unpack there, and Raul AIH Sports has already done a bit of a deep dive on this, but like I said, we know that Modest Card Collection was the underbidder because he said he was the underbidder. So when you come in here and look at the bid activity, the, mentioning of shill bidding being there, which is why Rob didn't pay, doesn't really fit in my opinion, because typically when you see shill bidding on an account, you're not seeing what we're sort of seeing here. You're typically seeing, one or two feedback people or some people that don't have 100% positive feedback. But if you click into each of these, you can find a somewhat interesting story. Now, I've talked to how you can do this in the past around spotting shill bidding on eBay because you essentially click into the bid activities or number of bids on that eBay item. Basically, we'll do it again here. Come in here, click on the number of bids. It'll take you to this page, which breaks down who bid on the item and for what amounts, and then when they also did it. But you can take it a step further by clicking on to each of the users, and that'll give you some information around the volume of bids they've had with that seller. Because what you also happen to see is when there is shill bidding, not only is it those low feedback accounts like I just mentioned, when you click into these things, you see bid activities greater than 90%, which is ridiculous, which means 90% of the items that user has bid on has been with that seller, which is not something you see, too often on eBay unless the person has only bid on a select few items. Now, to give you some more context, this account here is Modest Card Collections because he said he was the underbidder. This is the second one. So technically the underbidder, you click on it and you can see here that he bid 38 times in the last 30 days, 18 items with this seller, and 42% of his bids in the last 30 days were with this seller. So some might say that number is quite high, but when you're looking at shill bidding, you're normally seeing this number be 90+%, most of the time 99, 100% sometimes as well. When you click on the next two higher bidders, you're seeing the same sort of trend. This one, he's only bid on 7% of this, seller's items. And then the person who came fourth, only 28%. So that doesn't look like shill bidding to me. And it paints a question around, well, what was Rob's actual intention, right? We're not going to know what his intention was, but when he's sitting back and saying, well, I didn't pay for it because it looked like shill bidding to me. When you look at that bid activity, that does not look like shill bidding to me. He talks about having placed a mega bid, right? Which is a funny term. It just reminds me of this clip here from, the Johnny Depp lawsuit.
A mega pint.
But it just seems weird to me. It doesn't look like shill bidding, right? You look at that activity, it's not shill bidding. So then you have to ask the question, well, what was Rob actually trying to do? Was it buyer's remorse and he sort of got hooked on the auction itself and ended up paying a price that he thought was right at the time, but then once he actually won, the dopamine left and it was too high? Like, maybe that's what it was, but it's hard to know the answer, especially when it happened with two of the auctions that happened on from the same seller. I can understand why people are pushing back towards him, and I think he sort of needs to clarify that. I think the shill bidding accusations to the people below him probably just a poor excuse to hide the fact that he won this thing and then had buyer's remorse, in my opinion. But it could also be that he was intentionally trying to push the prices up, right? We won't know the answer to that. And the downside is because Rob has essentially come out and said he thought it was shill bidding and has now deleted the video, it sort of makes it hard to believe him when he's saying he thought it was shill bidding, right? Because then it becomes, well, were you trying to push this price up, right? And that's where people's eyes are going to go now, because he's tried to say it was shill bidding when clearly it doesn't look like it was shill bidding, and then he's also deleted the video, right? My point is, you can't argue against people now thinking you're trying to push the prices up, Rob, which is a bit disappointing. Now, the thing that I think is very important that I didn't message him about that he mentioned towards the end of his Instagram live that is now deleted is that he closed the video by some very interesting comments. He said something along the lines of, well, I don't want to push the prices up. If anything, I want the price of Eli Manning cards to come down. So much so, and I'm talking off the cuff, he did mention this, but I might be getting some of the words off. He said something along the lines of, well, so much so, I want to push the prices down that I made a private purchase via private sale, and I emailed Card Ladder, or I sent the details to Card Ladder so they could put that comp in to push the price down, to have that low comp within there. And that, in my opinion, raises a few more questions. When you're looking at it through the contents of what we just explained, right? He sort of loses that benefit of the doubt, unfortunately. So when you have those shill bidding accusations or trying to pump the prices up, and now you have this comment around trying to push prices down, yeah, they're both counterintuitive from each other, but that raises questions around those things as well. I think Rob, like I messaged him in the DMs, needs to give some clarity when he does jump on a live with P. Ryan or AOH Sports around the details of that Card Ladder sale. Because was that Card Ladder sale real? We have to ask that question now. And unfortunately for him, he, like I said a bit earlier, loses that benefit of the doubt. Everything is now questionable with regards to this guy's bid activity, because the shill bidding comment for the people beneath him doesn't fit, doesn't make sense. So then we basically now need to ask questions about sort of everything else that he is doing. But I'm really keen to sort of hear what you guys have to say on the situation. Let me know what your thoughts are about that Card Ladder thing, because it raises even more questions then, because how much work does Card Ladder actually do to verify the fact that sale was legitimate? And also, how much work does Card Ladder actually do to their sponsored content creators? I'm not saying Rob was sponsored for them. I can't recall if he was. But how much work do they actually do when the transaction that's going into Card Ladder is actually from someone that is trusted within the hobby? Is Card Ladder doing their due diligence with that sort of stuff as well? Or are they sort of letting it slide because Cardpoint have told her this sale happened, right? There's definitely favoritism that occurs within the hobby. I'm just curious whether it happens with their platform. So as always, this ended up being very long. I do apologize, but thanks for listening. Please share your thoughts down in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.